Hello, I'm David Groninger in Seattle, Washington. Today is Wednesday, December 23rd, 2015, 2 days before Christmas. It's very cold and windy outside, but I'm inside where it's warm and a little bit more comfortable. But I have this coat on because I'm still kind of warming up from taking a walk. I once heard an interview of some guy that was in Long Beach, California that was like 104 years old. He was 104, and he was asked, well, what's the secret of your longevity, And he said just two things. He said, eat little, walk lots. Eat little, walk lots. So in other words, he ate very little and he walked a lot. So I'm trying the same thing. I'm 59 years old, a ways to go before I get to 104, but I eat little and I walk lots, and it feels good. But it's very cold today, and I'm still warming up. That's the reason for this coat. Every day I ask myself the question, what kind of a message could I give in 5 minutes that might help 5 million people? I write down the answers, and then I pick something that comes to mind, and I give a talk on it. Well, I'm already a few minutes into my talk from rambling about eat little and walk lots. But in many of the times that we're looking for answers in life in some area, we get answers in other areas too. Because when we're looking for answers, then we're open to getting answers to questions that might even be different than the question we're currently asking. But anyway, the idea that came up today, it's called Lessons from the Battle of the Somme. The Battle of the Somme was a battle during World War I, and the Somme is the name of a river in France. And it's called the Battle of the Somme because there was a section of the river where it was near where the battle was fought. The lessons from the Battle of the Somme, it was fought nearly 100 years ago, beginning on July the 1st of the year 1916. Well, in 6 months, it'll be July of 2016. It will have been 100 years. The lessons from the Battle of the Somme. Now, people that understand history or historians are not going to find my oversimplified lessons very interesting. But for those who haven't studied this battle or the history of World War I, there are a couple of very excellent lessons. And the first one was this. In this battle, 20,000 Englishmen were killed the very first day. And I think even up till today, in the last 100 years, there's never been a battle, even in World War II, where 20,000 were killed on the same day. So it was quite a blunder, this initial thing that happened. And the reason that so many were killed, and this is the first lesson, it has to do with this. A map is not the same as the real thing. See, the English and French generals were looking at a map, and on the map, it looked like that all of the German machine guns would have been wiped out from 7 days and 7 nights of bombardment before the battle started. So on the map, it showed that all the barbed wire would have been blown away, and the machine guns on the German side would not be there. That's what they showed on the map. So, but in real life, it was different. Because when the guys ran over to the other side, over the top, and they didn't even run, they decided to walk because they were carrying so many things. They were carrying, barbed wire and heavy things because they were going to take over the trench and then defend the trench by putting new barbed wire on the other side. So they were walking over, but here's the thing. In real life, the machine guns were still there and the barbed wire was still there. And what little sections of the barbed wire were blown apart, all the guys had to funnel through those small sections, and the German machine guns picked them off like crazy. Horrible tragedy. Think about 20,000 human lives all gone in one day. And 100 years ago, think if those 20,000 lives just produced 2 more lives, and over the 100 years, just 3 generations, that's 60, 70, 80,000 more people that could be producing good things. What if there were 60 to 80,000 more doctors, just from the people that were killed? What a waste. Well, what do you know? That's how life works sometimes, Your time of your life ends always when you're halfway through whatever you're doing. I use this clock to remind me to hurry up and do what I need to do in my life so that the final clock doesn't go off when I'm halfway in the middle of trying to accomplish some dream or goal. But even if so, if you get the important ones done, hopefully you should feel good. So that's the first lesson. The map is different than the real thing. The map is sometimes referred to like a paradigm, kind of like a map or a map of the mind, an image of how we see something. But of course, that's just a picture of how we see it, or a map of how we see it. The real thing is different. So that's the first lesson. The map is different than the real thing. The second lesson was the leadership was disconnected from the people that are doing all the work. Here you have the French and English generals in the city of Paris, or maybe, a little bit far off from where the battle was actually fought, who were planning the battle and organizing it and leading what was supposed to happen, offering the leadership. But the people actually doing the fighting were the ones running across the no man's land and getting hit by the machine guns. There were even people the day before the battle started who even snuck across and reported back that the machine guns are still there and the barbed wire is still there. But the English and French generals said, no, that's not right. It couldn't be there because it's not on our maps. So the guys saw it in real life, but the English general said, no, it couldn't. Those machine guns can't be there. They have to have all been blown up from this much bombardment. So the leadership was disconnected from the actual men doing the work. Even when the guys doing the work confirmed that their maps were wrong, they still went for the maps. What a lesson in life this can be for any of us, because it's like when we have a perception of how we think something is, and it's quite different, maybe even the opposite than the way something is. And we use the perception or the paradigm or the map of our mind in order to navigate through this thing rather than to look right in front of our eyes of what's really happening. That's when so many, catastrophes happen in human life, in relationships, and accidents on the road, and you name it. So that's the second lesson. The leadership was disconnected from the people doing the work. The third lesson was the short-sightedness of it all. Actually, the short-sightedness of the whole war in itself. The idea that you have to hurry up and fight rather than taking the time to work out the differences by communication, by nonviolent communication. The French and the English and the Germans could have gotten together. They could have worked out their problems, but in the short-sightedness of it, the armies met and they got entrenched in the trenches, and that was that. Short-sightedness. A fourth lesson from the Battle of the Somme is this, and also from the whole World War I, is that it's kind of an emotional vulnerability, and goes like this. When a person's need to be right is senior than their need for life. In other words, their need to be right is more important than actually having life, or letting other people live. It seems kind of ridiculous, but how many people have a need to smoke cigarettes? And that need is stronger than the fact that 1,000 people a day, just in America, die from cigarette smoking. 40,000 people a year die from secondhand smoke. 400,000 a year die from smoking. So it's the need to be right is senior, and that's kind of an emotional thing. The emotional need that you are right, stronger than the actual logical ability to have life. See, in World War I, the people that ran France, England, and the guy that ran Germany, their need to be right was more important to them than being wrong and instead negotiating and compromising and maybe coming to some type of an agreement so the war wouldn't have to be fought anyway. But each one of them needed to be right. They had an emotional need that was more important than the millions of people who died. Similarly, the generals who planned the Battle of the Somme, their need to be right, their emotional need to be correct, that, oh, all the machine guns were blown up. Oh, the barbed wire, most of that should be gone. Their need to be right was more important than the lives of the people who actually were wasted in the big battle. And another lesson from the Battle of the Somme, the tragedy of letting somebody else do your thinking for you. Here in the whole war in itself, you might say, how many millions of people joined up on the English and French side, how many millions of people joined up on the German side, because they allowed the leadership of their countries to do their thinking for them. Now, had they done their own thinking and they really thought it out, it might have been quite a different story as to their enlisting or even willing to be drafted into this thing. So when you let other people do your thinking for you, watch out. Do as much of your own thinking as you can, and and if you have to have other people do your own thinking because it's a specialized kind of thing, well, yes, but in the area of politics, in the area of wars and things, I think it's helpful to do your own thinking. And then the last lesson of the Battle of the Somme, every time that history repeats itself, the price goes up. Every time that history repeats itself, the price goes up. How many battles like the Battle of the Somme were fought even before that battle was fought in different wars that had the similar kind of circumstances where the generals in charge, they didn't think that the enemy was so well defended, so they send all their guys to charge and they lose half of them in just a few hours. Take the Pickett's charge from the American Civil War. They thought that after shooting off all their cannons and stuff, that the Union lines would be fairly weak and they could just walk across that big long field with all their thousands of guys and make it through. Here again, because they're, history repeating itself, I don't know how many people were killed in Pickett's charge, 5,000, 7,000, a few thousand, however it was. It wasn't 20,000. So when history repeats itself in the Battle of the Somme, well, now you have 20,000 to get killed. Well, so these are the lessons from the Battle of the Somme. And remember, this was a battle that lasted actually maybe for quite a long time, but it began in July the 1st of 1916. And these are the lessons from the Battle of the Somme. The map is different than the real thing. Now, it's important to understand the map, and it's important to understand the maps in our mind, the paradigms, how we look at things, our perspectives, our perceptions of how things are. It's important to understand them and important to have them, but we must also understand that it's not the same as how things really are. It's an approximation or an interpretation. So in human understanding and human relationships, when two people have their own maps of how they think the other person is, it can be very helpful to still really study the other person face to face and learn from the other person directly, not just from your perceptions of how you think that other person is and how they will react or respond. The second lesson, when leadership is disconnected from the people doing the work. You can see this in companies all over the place. So the idea here is this: if you work in a place where your leadership is disconnected from the people doing the work, try to do something about it. Try to connect yourself to the leadership, or if you're the leaders, try to connect more with the people doing the work. Then the third lesson, the short-sightedness. Think more long term. Be more patient in all of your dealings. Fourth, the emotional need to be right, having a senior priority than your whole life or your health or your happiness. The emotional need to be right. Boy, that is really a big one. That killed so many people in World War I and in the Second World War. And then the tragedy of letting other people do their thinking for them. I think a famous quote from I think it was General Patton in World War II. He said, if everybody's thinking the same, then somebody's not thinking. If everybody's thinking the same, somebody's not thinking. So the tragedy of letting other people do your thinking for you. So be more mindful of everything around you and of the choices you make. And although we have to have input from scientists and politicians and business people and specialists in the decisions we make, do as much of your own thinking as you can when you do collect the information. And then the next lesson, every time history repeats itself, the price goes up. So I'm merely going to repeat these again and end off. Lesson number 1, the map is not the real thing. Lesson number 2, leadership is often disconnected from the people doing the work. Number 3, the other lesson, the short-sightedness. Number 4, the emotional need to be right being more important than human life. 5, the tragedy of people who let other people do their own thinking for them, too much of the time. And then 6, every time that history repeats itself, the price goes up. So it may interest you to study any different part of history, and when you do it, be an active student of history. Take notes and see if you can find certain patterns of human behavior that repeat themselves. Study your own history by keeping a journal, and you'll find a way that you won't have to repeat the same number of mistakes, the same kinds of mistakes. So the Battle of the Somme, it's worth studying because it is easy to see how clearly, well, in retrospect, of course, some of this human folly was, which at the time seemed like, high intelligence. And that hopefully should give you a clue as to the smartest things going on today politically, when 100 years from now or 50 years from now or even 20 years from now, in retrospect, looking back upon them, I think a lot of them will come to conclusions quite a bit different than the wisest people in the land here. So study history, learn from history, so that you can have a better today and a better tomorrow. That's the purpose for studying history. Well, this is David Groninger in Seattle, Washington, saying thank you.